You ever spend years getting really, really good at something, literally better than 99.9% of people in the world, and you still feel like somehow you don't belong? That was me, an Olympian, and yet my mind still tried to tell me that I was a fraud. Imposter syndrome has followed me through all phases of my career as an athlete, as I transitioned into performing, as working as a high diver, and now as I try and navigate the rest of my life. No matter what I accomplished, the voice in my head always found a way to doubt me. But weirdly, sometimes it helped. It forced me to work hard so I could prove that I did belong or I was worthy. But mostly, it just made me work against myself and make things a lot harder than they needed to be. So today, I want to talk openly and honestly about how imposter syndrome has shaped my journey for good, but mostly for worse. And then what I'm trying to do now to try and not let it get the better of me. You'd think the one place I'd feel confident would be the sport that I spent thousands and thousands of hours perfecting. But even at my peak, I still felt like I wasn't enough. For me as an athlete, imposter syndrome latched onto one thing in particular: strength. I can already feel my old coach Tom and some of my colleagues from Sheffield Diving starting to smile a little bit. I always very obsessively and negatively compared myself against people like Jack Law, very strong, very powerful. And if I wasn't as strong or as powerful as them, it automatically meant I wasn't as good as them. And this isn't me saying that, Jack had it easy or anything like that. I know how hard Jack trains in the pool, in the gym. There's no substitute for hard work ever. But certain people have certain things that come to them more naturally. So the point I'm trying to make is that it was a ridiculous goal and not an effective goal, me trying to get my quads to match the circumference of Jack's quads, particularly with anti-doping rules. Instead of seeing the value and the power in my own strengths, my line, my consistency, my style, my rip entries, all I did was obsess over what I wasn't. So even though I had enough strength to still perform at the highest level, it didn't seem to matter to me. And I'm not joking when I say that I would literally dread the first couple of days of a competition or a training camp. I'd be praying to my legs to show up and then get distraught when inevitably my legs weren't at 110% max power, and then wonder when the GB team or international competitors would realize that he doesn't really belong here. So I would work harder, but not smarter. I wasn't improving as efficiently as I could have been. And I was getting exhausted because my internal dialogue was just spiraling out of control. And so yes, imposter syndrome made me work harder, but most of the time I was just working against myself. So then came the first transition. I moved from competing into shows and performing and high diving. And in some ways that was easier. I was working in a team rather than competing against other people. But guess what? Imposter syndrome, still there. I wasn't doing Red Bull cliff diving competitions, so was I a real high diver? And I was learning, I was improving, but rather than celebrating that, I'd lie awake often in my cabin, staring at the ceiling in this tiny little room thinking, what if the team sees through this? And it's so easy for me to see how funny that is now. But at the time, I've got this tattoo on my shoulder, these are the Olympic rings. So I thought, people are going to hold me to that standard and they're going to see that tattoo. And what if I don't live up to that? No one was sitting there saying, sorry, Freddie, but your Barani, it's just not good enough. And unfortunately, you don't belong here. But that was all in my head. And because sometimes I let those thoughts control me, I just made everything way harder than it needed to be. And also a lot less fun. Even at this stage of being a performer, I could look at videos of my old competition diving days and still induce those same feelings of inadequacy. I reflected in a couple of posts recently about how I made a big mistake of attaching my identity to diving and how that caused me so many problems. And I think that's one of the things that made my imposter syndrome worse. And it even led to this point where I was afraid to promote myself in diving because people would then see how much of a failure I was. That's silly because coming from a sport like diving where we don't have professional leagues and it's hard to make a living in comparison to some other sports where there's a lot of money. And so the one thing that I should have absolutely been doing was promoting myself, but I was terrified to do that properly. So now moving into this next phase of my life, as you can probably imagine, imposter syndrome has come up with some new and exciting ways to mess with me. The good thing is that I've realized that I'm not on the way down. I'm still not even close to my peak. So actually this has given me the confidence to go out and try and learn new things, take on completely new different challenges. I've been learning about AI and generative AI and automation, software development, business, marketing. Now these are all things that I don't have years of training in. So you can imagine some of the thought loops that I've been getting into, and the sleepless nights, they're back, staring at the ceiling thinking, what the F are you trying to do? You know, what if when you deal with clients, are they going to see right through you and think like, well, why is this ex-athlete just masquerading as some kind of tech guy? And on and on. But I'm learning to deal with this. And one of the things that's helping is just taking action regardless. That might not be particularly helpful, or maybe it is, but it's definitely true. Next was realizing the emptiness of the word expert. I read this in the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss and talked about only needing to know more than the person you're talking to or the potential client to be able to provide them with value. And actually, often the people who are closer in time to the pain point of the experience that someone is going through, often you can provide a better answer to them because you understand what they're going through more. For example, if there's one diver having a problem, let's say they're 13, maybe the age group above diver who's 15 might have some better help for them, something that's more likely to click with them because they very recently understood their pain, they just went through it, versus someone like me or maybe say Tom Daly trying to help that same 13-year-old diver. And thirdly, I realized the importance of generalization, that I'm not supposed to walk the same path to becoming an expert for my entire life. Actually, the more interest you have, the more varied your path becomes, and then the more you're able to connect dots and more dots and in slightly different ways to other people. That's valuable because no one has ever walked my path, and also they never will. In sport, I wasted years trying to measure up to people who just had different strengths, rather than owning my own. And now, moving forward, it's crucial to me that I try and do this as little as possible. Instead of obsessing over what I don't know, I want to focus on what I do know, what I can share, how I can add value, and then how I can improve in a way that's not just obsessed about trying to be perfect all the time. And if there's one mindset shift that I think encapsulates all of this, is that I don't have to be the best, I just have to keep improving in my way. Imposter syndrome might never fully go away. In fact, I'm sure it won't, but I'm becoming more and more at peace with that. This is something that feels good to share, but also important to share. Maybe something that I wish that I'd have talked about sooner, because I'm sure there are divers, performers, or maybe people come from completely separate walks of life who are struggling with their insecurities, with imposter syndrome. And so maybe just seeing some of my ridiculous internal dialogue can help give you a little bit of solace. Let me know in the comments if and when you've struggled with imposter syndrome, because honestly, talking about it feels good. Ciao.